1045theteam.com is the Fifth Round Podcast. Back to talk about a huge week that happened in UFC, guys. We got our host, Ian Ford, Brian France. I'm your producer extraordinaire, Brian, the closer, Mariano. Now, guys, this was a huge deal not only for the UFC, but Conor McGregor himself by giving up, well, what was the word we used, Ian? Relinquishing his UFC featherweight title. Now, this is starting to ruffle some feathers between Mayweather and Aldo. What exactly is going on here?
So, Conor McGregor, 2 weeks ago, wins his second belt. First fighter ever to have two belts. He has yet to defend that featherweight title since he took it from Aldo in 13 seconds. There's a little bit of a card issue with UFC 206 missing its headliner after Daniel Cormier has to pull out with yet another injury. And in response, probably sooner than they wanted to, the UFC turns around and we still have yet to hear from Conor McGregor, but the UFC says, oh, Conor's relinquishing his belt. He's just giving it up after all the talk of Conor not wanting to get rid of a belt. Basically, they took the title away from him. They stripped him, which is their right, and eventually probably the right move. I think Brian would agree with me.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely the right move with a year of having that belt and never defending it.
But the way it was done has really set the MMA media and fan base afire with talk as to whether or not it was the right move. So taking the belt is the right move. Jose Aldo's had the interim belt for how long?
Since July.
He's never been able to challenge Conor for it. Conor's probably never going back to 145. I don't know if he could make the weight anymore.
No, and why would you want to?
But the way it was done, to take his belt away, and then they decide now Jose Aldo's interim belt is now the actual belt. And a fight between Max Holloway and Anthony Pettis is now for another interim title, which, to be honest, is really like it's a promise ring. They're fighting for a promise ring at UFC 206.
This feels like the generation of everyone gets a trophy.
Pretty much.
Here, you're around. You're okay. Here, we'll give you a belt. No, wait, we'll give you a belt. I feel like Oprah Winfrey. Ridiculous.
You can't fault the UFC. What happens is they have a card in Toronto that had a lot of promise that didn't come out as strong as they wanted, with a title fight on top. Title fight's gone. Daniel Cormier gets injured. Title fight's gone. He's the champ. He can't fight. Anthony Rumble Johnson, who's the challenger, says, I don't want an interim belt. I only want the real thing. I'm waiting for Dan. I'm not fighting again until Dan's ready. Mm-hmm. So in order to prop a card up, they make a belt out of thin air. Just poof, here's an interim belt. You two can fight over it. For one guy who honestly deserves a shot in Max Holloway. Yeah. 9-fight win streak. He's been killing people. His last loss is to Conor McGregor. He deserves a title shot. But Anthony Pettis, he's 1-3 in his last 4.
Yeah, I mean, losing his 3 lightweight fights and then drops down to 145, and he didn't look as good as he should have, but he did come out with a finish and a win in the third round.
There's so many problems with this all over the place. One, to take Conor's belt away is the right move. To do it that way just looks like a sham. It's terrible to have it happen because you need to prop a card up. Taking it away was the right move, but they should have done it differently. 2, Aldo just goes from interim to regular champ. Why not just set him up a fight and have him actually fight somebody to win that belt?
Well, Dana White did come out, and I read an article earlier today. He did come out and say that Jose Aldo wasn't technically ready yet for a fight, especially that big of nature. So they decided because Max Holloway and Anthony Pettis, well, Max Holloway was deserving of at least a number 1 contender spot. Why not have them fight? And they needed the main event for 206 to come up.
Which I get, but then we were talking about this the other day. I don't agree with Anthony Pettis getting a title shot at all. And I don't agree that if he wins this fight, he's going to be on par with the Randy Couture's and the BJ Penns and the Conor McGregors of this world. Those are the only 3 guys to hold a belt in 2 weight classes. Do you really think Anthony Pettis is on the same level as those 3 guys? Conor McGregor's already made himself a legend. Randy Couture is a Hall of Famer, the Hall of Famer. One of the first guys to go in.
Captain America.
And BJ Penn was a phenom. Anthony Pettis is a flash in the pan. He's never been that good. When he won his 155 belt, he was the next big thing. They put him on a Wheaties box, and he couldn't even defend the belt.
Yeah, he got injured too much and then lost it for when he finally was able to fight again.
Anybody who's watched his career is not going to say he's a legend. They're not going to say he's a Hall of Famer. They're going to say he's a guy that wins big and loses big. and is not consistent. And now he's got a shot to win a second belt and put himself in line with those guys, and he doesn't deserve it. He's not even Frankie Edgar, who should get a shot at 145, should have a chance to win that belt and call himself a two-division champ. Anthony Pettis doesn't deserve this title shot. Well, and you're only making it a title fight because you need a main event. That's it. You shouldn't just be creating belts because you need to sell one card. It blows my mind that they would do that and devalue the belt because it really is just a promise ring at this point.
Basically.
So from someone kind of on the outside looking in here, is this more of a macro look at this? Is this just maybe the UFC has too much going on every month to where now we have UFC fight nights all the time? Now we have a pay-per-view every single month. And if something like, or are we looking more of this being just a perfect storm of stuff that happened around one pay-per-view? Because now we don't have the depth that we once had, at least from what it looks like, to fill every single month or really prop up cards. Because like you're saying, Ian, all we're doing now is propping up this to make it basically so we can sell it. That's all they want to do is say, oh, no, this is good. He's fighting for something. Please buy it. Here you go.
Oh, absolutely. At this point, you are looking at it for old-time fans like myself and Brian. If you remember the golden age of MMA when it was blowing up and just starting to be a big thing, back around The Ultimate Fighter 1, you had how many cards a year? 3 to 4 cards a year, maybe 5 cards per year, and that was it. I mean, you're looking all the way back to the early 2000s. You were at like UFC 36 and 37. How do you go from the 30s to 200 and change in 15 years when it took you 10 years to get to the 30s and 40s? It's a lot of things coming into play. One, they want to make more money, so they're going to do more cards because you make more money. 2, you have a deal with Fox. You owe Fox a certain number of cards per year. So now you're contractually obligated to do more cards. So you got to do the Fox cards and the Fox Sports 1 cards because you've made a commitment to those, to Fox. That's you've signed, you have to do it. Then you want to do all these international cards with their, total world effing domination campaign they had a few years back. They're doing cards all overseas because they want to build the fan base there. Then you have the Fight Pass cards. They want UFC Fight Pass to work. It's Netflix for fights, but they have to put cards on it to make it worth buying. So you're obligated there too. And you don't make enough money on those. The pay-per-view is still your bread and butter, so now you got to do pay-per-view cards. So now you went from somewhere between 4 to 8 cards a year to 40, 50. You don't have enough fighters. Suddenly you have 500 fighters under contract. People don't know who half of them are, and you run into problems like this. This is, I think I read a stat the other day between Bellator, World Series of Fighting, and the UFC. This is over 50 now main events have been scrapped due to injury across the board this year. It happens. Guys get hurt training.
And it almost seems like they're biting off more than they can chew now because it's, okay, yep, we'll sign with you. Great. And don't worry, we'll get you those fights. Well, wait a second. This guy just fought 5 months ago. And you're going to make him fight. Okay, he can fight again. That's fine. No, wait, he got hurt. Now we got to piece together this guy. At this point, in a year and a half, when all these guys are getting hurt because they're fighting so often, they're going to call us. We're going to be fighting UFC Fight Night, whatever, in Albany in 2 years at this point.
Absolutely. And Brian will go with me on this one. This is what happens when you have UFC 205.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. They blew their load on UFC 205. I mean, you had 3 title fights in one night, which they've only done one other time. And so that kind of screwed up 206 because if somehow the main event, like it did, get scrapped, you're kind of shitting your pants going, oh, crap, we just blew our load right there with 3 different title fights. Sure. We don't have anything because all those champs need to recover now, and it's only less than a month away.
Absolutely. And if you look at 206 right now on the pay-per-view card, 5 fights on the main card, 2 of them are only there because they got scrapped off of UFC 205. Kelvin Gastelum didn't make weight, so he's on this main card fighting Tim Kennedy because Rashad Evans didn't get cleared. And Donald Cerrone was Kelvin Gastelum's opponent. They're both on the main card. That's 2 main card fights for 206, and they're only there because they didn't happen at 205 because of different issues. Yeah. How many fights on 205 could have been the main event here over Holloway Pettis. Easily 5 or 6 fights on that card would be above that fight. The UFC basically turned around, and this is a recent stat that got put out in a couple of different publications, that polling at UFC events and polling by cable companies of pay-per-view purchasers shows that the UFC's fan base is about 15% what you would consider a hardcore fan. Myself and Brian. People who watch every event, no matter what, that's your hardcore fans. That's 15%. It means 85% of the people buying the pay-per-view are just casual observers.
They're me.
Looking to buy it because of a big name.
Sure.
So for me and Brian, you make that a title fight, and we both look at it like, you're kidding me, right? That's a joke. This isn't real. That's not really a title fight, is it?
Yeah.
But for everybody else, you hold that gold belt up, and they go, oh, this fight matters.
Yeah.
So for somebody who's not educated, they go, oh, this is a title fight. And you go, oh, wow, I got to watch this. I got to watch the card now. It
doesn't matter who it is. They're fighting for something.
For me, they're fighting. Honestly, I keep saying it, but it's a promise ring.
Yeah.
All they're doing is fighting for a chance to fight Jose Aldo for the actual belt.
So if I'm Dana White and I'm the UFC, did I learn my lesson by maybe I can't have a UFC 205, or am I saying, okay, I made a ton of money off of that. I really don't care what happens right now because it's 1 month and one pay-per-view. We'll make it up again when we can have another. If UFC 214 is crazy like UFC 205 was.
It all depends on whether people tune in for this. They'll keep doing it if they keep making money. So if enough people, I mean, you're not going to get the 2 million pay-per-view buys or 1.5 for this card.
They'll probably get just under 1 million for this pay-per-view.
Which if they do, you can guarantee they're going to do it again because honestly, this to me is worth, 250K, 300K.
Yeah, I mean, if they get over 500,000 pay-per-view buys on this, they will definitely do another thing like 205, especially around the July card that they always have the International Fight Week.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not something I'm happy about, but they're going to keep doing it. And I think it's going to get a little better because what you're looking at is the new ownership is getting rid of certain things. Their plan is to scale back on a lot. The word is they're getting rid of a lot of the international cards, which will, one, require them not to have certain fighters who are only really there because they're going to draw on their home market. They're going to scale back on the Ultimate Fighter TV series, which the Ultimate Fighter finale is this weekend, and it's not what it used to be.
No, not even close to what it used to be. It used to be
What
huge.
channel is that even on now?
It's on Fox Sports 1.
Oh, okay.
Wednesday nights at 10 o'clock.
How many different Ultimate Fighter winners can you remember from the beginnings, from UFC 1, Ultimate Fighter 1 to 10? We could just rattle them off. There's a ton of them.
Honestly, after the heavyweight one with Kimbo Slice and Brendan Schaub and all those guys, it really hasn't been the same.
No, and even a couple after that. You remember the Court McGee's and the Chris Camozzi's, but you really are watching it because you remembered Nate Diaz, Gray Maynard, everybody off the Ultimate Fighter 1, even Ryan Bader.
Mm-hmm.
But how many guys do you remember from the Ultimate Fighter 20? Can you even tell me what weight class it was?
Was that
just
the
not
women's
pulling.
one?
It's
Ronda
not
Rousey
pulling
versus
viewers.
Miesha Tate, I don't remember him that much.
It's not pulling the viewers anymore, and they're going to scale back on the Ultimate Fighter, which is, again, going to stop the influx of talent that you have to give fights to that probably doesn't even need to be there, and it's going to save them some money. It's going to come back on the cards. They're going to still push Fight Pass. They're going to have to do the TV network deals because that's going to be a big moneymaker for them. That's another big thing. I mean, every other major sports network is locked up for close to a decade at this point. The NFL, the NHL, the MLB, the NBA. The UFC's deal is up in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a bidding war. Who knows what network they're going to be on? They're positioned perfect.
How many they will be on because they can go multiple channels.
They've positioned themselves perfectly they're going to be the only sports franchise available for bidding for a while. So people are going to want them. And they have that demographic, that 18 to 35, where young and dumb kids who are going to spend money and are really impressionable. That's your biggest buying market, and that's your biggest watching market for the UFC. But that new ownership group, they're stuck in a lot of weird places like we're going to talk about later. Now you've got all these unions or associations jumping up. We'll get into that further on, but they've got to find a fix. They have got to find a fix because right now it's too much. It's oversaturated, and you have Bellator coming in, creeping up, doing a little bit better viewership, taking some fighters. Lorenz Larkin might be on his way out. He's in discussions now. They've taken enough big fighters. It's not the green grass that it was 5 years ago when the UFC looked like they couldn't be touched.
Yeah. I mean, WME, it being now a $4 billion company, might have screwed things up in the long run because they're more of a corporation, so they only want to look right now what's going to make money for us right now and not for the long run, like the Fertitta brothers were looking and planning for.
Absolutely. That's another thing you got to look at. I mean, right now it's all about the almighty dollar and the dollar today, right now, because they need the money. They need to prove that $4 billion investment could make money. It's not the UFC where they're willing to just grow slow. With Zuffa, it's the UFC with WME where they need to make that money right now. At the end of the day, though, that Max Holloway-Pettis fight, I don't think Pettis has much of a chance. I do think Holloway's going to take it if he fights smart, but if Pettis wins that fight, I'm not going to be happy because you're going to have to call him a two-division champ. You're going to have to act like he's a great, and he's not an all-time great.
Yeah, even with it being an interim title, you still got to call him a two-division champ, even though he really doesn't deserve it unless he beats Jose Aldo.
He's made a career at this point off of one kick, the Showtime kick that everybody wants to talk about.
And that wasn't even in the UFC. That was WEC in their last lightweight title fight.
It didn't even knock a guy out. It wasn't that good of a kick. And other than that, he's made a career out of dominating one man.
Ben Henderson.
He had Ben Henderson's number.
The only number he ever had.
That's pretty much it. I mean, when he first came into the UFC, he got beat by Clay Guida.
Yep.
Clay the Carpenter. I'm so boring. I'd rather watch paint dry than Clay Guida fight right now.
Oh, man.
And that guy beat him.
Mm-hmm. And then you also look at what did Ben Henderson really do after that? He went up to 170, got lucky by catching Brandon Thatch in a guillotine.
He fought. Brandon Thatch was overrated. We know that now. At the time, we didn't. He really wasn't that good. And then he went to Bellator, and has he won a fight there yet?
No, he hasn't. He actually just lost to the champ, Michael Chandler, and it wasn't. He didn't look like he did.
No, he tried to point fight. He looked like he was just trying to score on leg kicks and jabs, and he got beat. That's the biggest thing Bellator's got going right now. They can talk about their UFC guy coming over and getting beat up. Mm-hmm. Congratulations, but it's a washed-up UFC guy. Wait until Rory McDonald runs through your division.
Yep. Well, I think there's talks about Rory McDonald actually getting the title shot next.
At the end of the day, I sincerely hope that this interim title fad ends because this is not the first, and it probably won't be the last time they've added an interim title for no legitimate reason.
The only reason for it is because they needed a title fight for the pay-per-view, and Jose Aldo wasn't ready to fight yet.
It hasn't gone well so far. The last two interim titles they made was Jose Aldo's title because Conor wouldn't go down. That's even legitimate. I give him that. That's a legitimate reason, but what's happened with it? Jose Aldo sat there with a belt on his shelf that didn't really mean much and hasn't done anything. And John Jones. They gave one to John Jones. Well, how did that go? Well, he didn't get to defend that either because they had to take it away from him.
He didn't even go challenge for the title. And, well, Conor McGregor did have an interim title just last June and then beat Jose Aldo.
Yeah, but that was another one where did Conor really need to have an interim title?
For Conor's sake, yes, but
he didn't really need to have it at all. It's one of those things where I get it. You want to put a title on somebody's waist. There's only a few times in the history of this company that it's been legitimate. Frank Mir got hurt in a motorcycle accident. You didn't want to strip him? I get it. Randy Couture left during a contract dispute. I get it. Tito Ortiz refused to fight somebody. So you made a fight between Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture with an interim title. I understand that too. Dominic Cruz getting hurt. I get it. Those are the only four. If a guy's hurt and he can't fight, you don't want to strip him. I understand it. A guy's indisposed and can't fight for another reason. I get it. Jose Aldo's healthy and he could fight in 3 months. Just say this is a number one contender fight.
Exactly.
And then let him fight for the belt.
But because they needed a main event for a pay-per-view where it's come to the point where they only do title shots for pay-per-views.
The next thing you see, we're going to have Money in the Bank fights in the UFC. That's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. These guys are fighting for an intercontinental title. Ooh, okay.
Well, crap. Right. With WME, I wouldn't be surprised if it actually does happen.
Well, past that, let's move. Speaking of WME, because it does segue. The Mixed Martial Arts Athletes Association just made an announcement. That would be headed up by Bjorn Rebney, with 5 fighters: Cain Velasquez, Donald Cerrone, Tim Kennedy, George St. Pierre. I'm going to forget the 5th one, Brian. You remember who the other guy was?
Cain Velasquez, Donald Cerrone, George St. Pierre, Tim Kennedy.
Doesn't matter. Either way. So you had 5 fighters, and Bjorn Rebney have this giant announcement on a conference call that they are now creating a fighters association. This would be the 3rd of its kind. There's been a fighters association. TJ Dillashaw, of course. There's been a fighters association out there, which you probably didn't know about, for 10 years. And that fighters association has done nothing for fighters. Made no waves. Most people don't know it exists. Then you had a union started by Scott Boras about 6 months ago. Well, they just lost their 2 biggest connections to the mixed martial arts community and their backing because they can't even keep their information private. They had an information leak. Names got out. Names weren't supposed to get out. Everybody jumped ship. Now you have a 3rd one trying to get the fighters together, and they made it specific to be known they're not a union. Do you think this is going to have any positive effect for the sport whatsoever?
If they're being reasonable about what they're looking for, possibly, because that means the promotions will only have to deal with one person. They don't want to have to deal with a whole bunch of agents that are trying to do everything for just one fighter. It's going to be all fighters together. But all the fighters at the same time want what they deserve. Not what another fighter deserves. They want what they want.
I don't see collective bargaining ever working in the UFC, which is part of what they're after.
Not even just the UFC, just in MMA, all the organizations.
It's unfortunate that, for instance, the NFL, it's a 50-50 split, owners and players.
Yeah,
collective bargaining.
But this, like Brian, I would agree, because it's unlike football and baseball, where the guys are going to get their money, yes, but for the greater good, it works out for them to have a union to talk to the owners. In this, it's if I'm Conor McGregor, I'm going to get mine. I don't give a crap about anybody else,
100%.
If I'm a big guy that I know I'm going to get mine, I really don't care about the little guy in Bellator or the little guy in UFC. I don't care. I've done what I needed to do to get up here. You mean nothing to me. I'm not going to go and collectively bargain for you.
No,
absolutely not.
That's why I don't see it working, because what they're asking for is to get the split closer to other major sports. What they really want is a 50-50 split in profits. Right now in MMA, or in the UFC specifically, it's closer to 85-15. Fighters are taking home about 15% of the money. Now that sucks. You want that to go up? 100% get it. But this is not the same as the NFL again. It's not like the NFL has to promote each and every game. They don't have to run all kinds of marketing ads to get that game up there. Those guys get together and play. They're wearing a uniform that sells. The UFC's got to do the work for these guys. They have to promote them. They have to give them the platform. They have to set up all the media engagements. They have to do all these things. They build the name for that fighter, or give the fighter the opportunity. Without the UFC, Conor McGregor is still just a bum. He's still just a guy in Ireland.
Yeah, well, yes and no, but the same, I mean, if the NFL's not there, then, Ezekiel Elliott isn't great. Aaron Rodgers isn't great.
It's
tough.
tough.
He's playing in the CFL. It really doesn't mean anything. But I do understand the point ultimately you're trying to make. It comes down to the fact that if in the NFL, okay, I can go and make money elsewhere while also making my contract.
Yep.
So a part of these contracts, I'm guessing on this, you can confirm or deny this with me. If I'm signing a contract, if I'm Conor McGregor and I'm signing a contract with the UFC, okay, I'm ultimately just signing for what I'm getting over this length of time. As in...
Per fight.
Per fight.
It is per fight. So why? What is the difference between me signing a deal for this, or like a percentage I'm getting this fight, as opposed to a 2-year X amount of fights deal with the UFC?
So the way it generally works is you're contractually obligated for most of the fighters. I mean, if you're a special person, like, hard to think of one right now, Dan Hardy. If Dan Hardy comes back and fights, it's going to be fighting plus commentating. Mm-hmm. Or certain guys have fighting plus promotion.
Sure.
Fabricio Verdum's doing some promotion for him. Or was.
Was.
So now the average guy signs, say you sign 3 years, 9 fights. That contract is good for 3 years or 9 fights, whatever happens first.
Okay.
And it's for X amount of dollars per fight. So you're signing up. Your contract says you make $50,000 to show, $50,000 to win. It's got some special riders. If you're in a title fight, your pay bumps to this. If you win a title, your pay bumps to this. That contract is good until the time frame expires, or until until the fights are expired.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's difficult to turn around, and the only way to do it to give them a percentage is pay-per-view shares. But they don't give pay-per-view shares to you unless you sell the pay-per-view.
Exactly.
So a Conor McGregor or any other champion, those are generally riders in there. You become a champ, you get this contract instead. It automatically activates this second contract. It takes your contract you currently have, null and void, and activates the second one you already signed, which says now you get pay-per-view shares. So if Conor fights at UFC 205, every time somebody buys that pay-per-view and pays $60, Conor gets $2 or whatever it is. But that's big.
The question is the basis still the same? Am I still activating this second contract? Is the basis still I'm still signing 3 years, 9 fights?
Same idea. Yep.
Okay. So I have to lead you into this. I know we were talking about it off the air, but I have to lead you into it. This just recently happened where Conor McGregor got his boxing license in California. Mm-hmm. And this has all been talked about, and it seems like all it is just talk, which it might ultimately just be.
Yep.
Talk between him and Floyd Mayweather. What is Conor's contract now? Do either of you know it off the top of your head?
I don't know the
long
specifics. I don't know the specifics.
It can't be more than another year or two, right?
He has used his leverage better than anybody, and he generally gets a new contract before every fight.
Well, sure. We talked about this a few episodes ago where we were talking about how he wanted a percentage of this. Like he's asking, give me some part of the UFC for all I've done for you.
What I can say with a lot of confidence is his contract is more than likely the same as any UFC contract ever before that's ever been signed, and this has been a reason why they didn't get some big free agents they wanted in the past. Mm-hmm. You can't do anything else without their permission. Yep. You can't do the WWE. You can't do boxing. You can't do submission grappling, kickboxing. You can't even ride a motorcycle unless they say, yeah, go ahead.
So how did Brock Lesnar get back into the WWE? Because his contract expired?
Yeah. He retired. He retired.
Okay, so
And they didn't. Brock Lesnar was one of those guys where if you play by their rules and you do everything they want you to do and you make money for them, they treat you really well.
Okay.
If you are going to play hardball, that's fine. If you're Conor McGregor and you're going to play hardball with them, that's all well and good. They will play that game because you're making them money.
Sure.
But don't turn around and ask for a favor. Hey, I want to go box this guy. No. Sorry.
Well, it raises the question now, because if this were to happen, if let's say it's December, let's say he's got a year and a month left on his contract, maybe 2 fights, maybe 1, whatever it may be. If he were to let this go and his contract expires, can he now do this?
Yes, at a certain point. So, for instance, Lorenz Larkin is a guy at 170 pounds that just recently fought out his contract.
Yep.
Now, the way the UFC generally does it is when you have 1 fight left, when you sign the contract for the last fight, they offer you a new contract and say, do you want to do it on the last fight on this contract, or do you want to take this raise and we'll start the new contract with this fight? It's a good way for them to
say, stay with us.
And it wouldn't be free agency per se, but it stops the idea of, because now you're going to go ahead and sign that, get more money right now, and you started a whole new contract. So then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you let it run out, they have a match clause. So for a guy like Lorenz Larkin, it's only 3 months. An exclusive negotiation clause. For a guy like Lorenz, it's only 3 months. So his contract ran out, and he had 3 months where he couldn't talk to anyone else, only the UFC. And they never budged off their offer. So he said, fine, I'll wait 3 months. Sucks for him. He can't earn money for 3 months. And whatever momentum he had going, fans stopped talking about him because it's been 3 months. Now he has a match clause. So even if he gets another offer and he likes it, if the UFC says we'll give you the exact same thing, he's with the UFC.
No, and I agree, but it's a little bit different what Conor's going through now, because he has all the momentum right now.
Absolutely.
So he could ultimately say, he was going to take a year off or something anyway because of the kid and everything else. That's great. Good for him.
Well, then they would probably just pause his contract until he was ready to talk more.
Well, I have a feeling with him anyways.
How can you do that?
That's how they did it with George St. Pierre, but
he retired. Connor's not retired, so
he never technically retired though.
Well, he walked away.
He needed a break, And so they paused his contract.
But it basically activated a retirement clause for him, which is why they were able to freeze it. Conor, they won't.
Yeah.
Conor, unless he turns down a certain number of fights and says no, then the contract is still going. But he owes them fights. And I have a feeling with a guy like Conor, they did the same thing with George. It's not years. It's not years, it's just fights.
I think that's the biggest difference, because if it is years, which then he's sitting in the perfect seat.
He's in the driver's seat and he can just wait. But you got to figure he just re-signed a new contract before 205. It can't be anytime soon.
True.
It's got to be 2 years.
True. So then in that case, he's waiting either 2 years to make, however, if this whole thing were to happen.
Yeah. And with their champions, they're a lot more strict, because the last thing they want you doing is walking away with that belt. You do not leave the UFC with your belt and go someplace else, because now they're champs fighting someplace else and they don't want that. So I have a feeling his is going to be fights, and if, God forbid, he's brash enough, dumb enough, whatever you want to phrase it, to go take a boxing fight sometime soon, he's going to be in a world of hurt, because the UFC is going to sue the pants off. Oh, the UFC is going to sue him so hard. They are not afraid of legal battles. Nope. They're not. They've done it before. Randy Couture tried to walk away to fight Fedor Emelianenko in Japan for a different organization years back, and they sued him for for every cent he was worth. And eventually he lost a lot of money in legal battles and got forced to come back. And he had to defend that belt anyways. And here comes Brock Lesnar. They weren't nice to him. They didn't give him an easy fight. He came back after this huge layoff, and they said, here's Brock Lesnar. And Brock Lesnar just planted him through the cage and took his belt away. Mm-hmm. Now, he played the good soldier after that, because he didn't have any leverage anymore. But the UFC plays dirty. They don't fight clean. They're going to come after you whatever way they can to win. And if Conor thinks he's going to go box Floyd Mayweather without their permission, he's not going to make a penny doing it.
Nope.
If the fight ever happens, because they'll probably freeze the fight before it can. It's a tricky situation. I'm
trying to look it up, see if I can find it here, because it's saying right now. Let's see if I can find this here. 16 to 20 million per fight.
Yeah, he's making enough money.
Yeah, and then if
well, this is the other problem. They're not publicly traded, so they don't have to release anything.
True.
Yeah.
True. That's why I'm trying to find out if there's any loopholes, if anything, I can bring this up, because here's one, SB Nation, how the McGregor Mayweather fight could happen without the UFC's permission.
Oh, I'd love to read that. Ooh.
Yeah, this should be a good one, because, I mean, this, for Conor, ultimately he wants this to happen because it's just a massive pay. He could be Manny Pacquiao. That's fine. Go kick my butt for 12 rounds. I really don't care. I'm getting,
I don't know why he would want to do it, though. I think more than likely he's just talking it up for hype, because if he's a smart guy, he knows he can go in there and he can get paid to do it and fight Floyd. But he can go in there and get paid to fight Floyd and lose. He's not a boxer. He's not a boxer. Let's get this straight right now. Conor McGregor's stance, the way he fights, his style, everything does not work with boxing gloves. Does not work with big 16-ounce gloves on.
So I'm just reading. As you guys are talking, I'm like looking over this quickly, and it says there's any chance that Mayweather McGregor would happen without the UFC's involvement, and according to Dana White, there is, quote, no way in hell that is going to happen, end quote.
No, they won't let it. There's no way. He's exclusive to them. I mean, they had a shot at a guy named Sergey Karatanov years ago, and they wanted him badly. He's a heavyweight. Heavyweights are hard to come by, and he wouldn't come over because he would have to stop professionally kickboxing, and he wasn't willing to lose the money that he made from kickboxing.
Well, also look at Fedor Emelianenko, the greatest heavyweight of all time. Well, one of arguably the greatest of all time.
At this point, I mean, I guess you still got to call him that, because nobody's taken the
arguably.
mantle, but
we can just say arguably.
It's that guy. Oh, Fedor, I still can't believe you went to Bellator to fight Matt Mitrione. Are you serious?
Matt Mitrione's most likely going to beat him.
Scott Coker didn't learn his lesson after the last time, where he literally sold his own company upstream to get Fedor there, and they just couldn't afford it. So now you're going to have him fight Matt Mitrione.
So not to interrupt you guys, but I looked at this. They're saying if it were to happen, there's 3 steps that need to happen. Step 1 just happened this week. McGregor needs to attain a boxing license, preferably in New York or California. Obviously, you got it in California. Yeah. Step 2 would be them to actually say there's going to be a fight. Put it on paper. Okay. Step 3, immediately file for a declaration relief against the UFC, citing the Muhammad Ali Reform Boxing Act provision against contracts to make the claim to that the restrictive provision of the UFC's contract is restraining McGregor from boxing.
Okay, so that
and
is a possibility.
Licensed under boxing, so now since he became a boxer by doing this, he can pull the Ali Act and actually make this happen.
If Conor tries this, and that is, now that you're laying out how, that is a distinct possibility. That's crazy. There is a possibility that happens. If that goes down, that changes the sport of mixed martial arts forever, drastically, because now the Ali Act applies to mixed martial arts is what they're going to say. If that happens, that sets case law. I mean, I'm using job experience here. That sets case law. That case law is now going to attach itself to every MMA fighter that wants to follow down the same road, and suddenly all those UFC contracts are null and void. Every single one. So the Ali Act says you can't hold a guy under contract for more than a year.
Yeah. Let me see. I can pull it up right here.
Oh, I can tell you just from reading it over. That means it says you can't hold a guy under contract for more than 1 year. He needs to get a new contract every year. That sets the mixed martial arts world up on its head and blows everything up out of the water and ruins the UFC. I don't see any way that ever happens. And if it does, God help us, because my favorite sport just went crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, he's doing this the right way. I mean, there's no doubt about it, because he goes to California, which all the rules in New York are really against him, even though he could. And obviously he can't do this in Nevada because that's the UFC's home turf.
Oh, yeah.
So he goes to California, and then they're obviously bringing in a lot of, legal mumbo-jumbo here.
The problem is it would set precedent in court that any mixed martial artist can do that, and it would turn the whole MMA world upside down in a heartbeat. Conor McGregor that's it. He nerfed the world. He broke it.
Yeah.
He just broke everything. Wow. I hope that doesn't happen. God help us.
It's definitely. Let's see here. If we don't have access to McGregor's contract, based on what information is available, it would seem the length of the current deal rumored to be 8 fights and 42 months.
There you go.
Wording of typical champions clause would add the longer he has 3 fights or another year as champion as of right now.
Yep. So
that was written in May of this year.
So if, God forbid, that happens, does anybody think he stands a chance against Floyd Mayweather?
Well, honestly, I mean, if we get past the point of we really don't care, he's ultimately trying to do this to get money.
Mm-hmm. But
right?
would you be willing to take that hit to your popularity?
What hit?
You just lost.
Who cares? He jumped in. That's like saying if Serena Williams left tennis and went and and played basketball.
But there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that don't look at it that way. They don't realize what. Come on, people talked about Rousey Mayweather for the longest time. I'll tell you right now, Mayweather fights a mixed martial artist under MMA rules, and he gets smoked in 15 seconds. If anybody in MMA right now goes and steps in a boxing ring with Mayweather, they're gonna get their faces punched off. That's just how it's going to happen. Mayweather can't stop a takedown. He's never trained it.
Well,
he has no jiu-jitsu. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's going to get hurt.
Even the kicks alone, he'd be thrown off.
A pure boxing stance like Mayweather uses in a boxing ring does not work in a cage. We've seen it a million times. It just doesn't work. It leaves you open for all kinds of stuff. In a real street fight, a boxing stance will get you killed. But you walk in with McGregor's wide karate stance or Rousey's judo stance with wider hips and different feet placement, and you're going to get killed in a boxing ring. Mm-hmm. There's no way. McGregor walks in there, he gets embarrassed in front of everybody, and now he's a joke. There's going to be pictures of him getting the crap kicked out of him all over the internet, and nobody's going to think he's all that tough anymore. Because the casual observer does not realize that MMA and boxing are two different things. They just don't. It's how many...
Well, we've seen a few of Mayweather's fights, and obviously he's not the guy that's going to go after you.
No.
He's going to say, okay, I got you. All right, come and get me.
But you're never going to hit him.
You're right. But the question does arise to where is the move that Conor is making ultimately just putting everyone else, on the edge of their seat by saying, all right, what can we do? The UFC is going to say, if he's going to do this, we need to reel him in now and give him what he wants so he stays with us.
I think that's what it is. I think he's playing games. I think he's throwing up flags just to make him worry. Because I'll tell you what, I'd give him a lot to keep the Ali Act at MMA. Mm-hmm. A lot. Because that Ali Act is, there are good things about the Ali Act. There really are. But it's a large part of what killed boxing. It's a very large part of what let boxing fall off the map to the point where it is right now. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear boxing's dead. Guess what? Boxing ain't what it was in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s. Boxing is dead. It's not dead, but it's not what it used to be. MMA is the biggest combat sport right now by a large margin over boxing. Boxing pulls in one big pay-per-view every couple of years, but Can you name me more than 5 boxers that are currently fighting?
No, but ultimately, they had their heyday too, and what happened? They tried to get a little greedy. They didn't have the people, and I'm not one to really say this because I don't follow it as much as you guys do at UFC, but are they trying to do the same thing?
I think the difference is going to be that the UFC has got everybody, or at least the majority of everybody, under one roof. You get to see the best fight the best all the time. You're always getting the best guys fighting the best guys.
The question is, can you recycle them after a certain amount of time? Because that's what boxing ran into. And now, because you guys know I'm really into numbers and betting-wise, of course, Westgate Las Vegas put out an actual line if this fight were to happen.
Please tell me Mayweather's a huge favorite.
Oh, he is a huge favorite. But it's actually closer than I thought it would be.
What is he right now?
Mayweather is minus 2,000. Okay. McGregor is plus 950.
I would bet my house on Mayweather.
Oh, I mean, in a boxing fight, you would have to, and it actually might even go bigger than that, because boxing wise, I agree. But if you're sitting in a sports book in Las Vegas and you're telling me that I can get 10-1 on my investment,
and might throw a couple of
he
bucks.
Might actually get higher. You're definitely going to get higher than that if this fight actually does happen.
Oh, yeah.
And you can't tell me that the numbers. Could you imagine if just for one fight? I don't know if this could happen. But if the UFC put their ego away for a minute
and helped promote,
and let's say they help promote this, could you imagine? This is $1 billion super fight.
I want to see McGregor, Mayweather, sure, but I don't want to see it on Mayweather's terms. I want to see Mayweather shut up for once and put some 4-ounce gloves on.
You want him to get his butt kicked.
I want him to put on 4-ounce gloves and step into a cage.
I know want him to get his butt kicked.
I would love to see Mayweather fight in the octagon under MMA
but that's
rules.
Never going to happen.
Hey, bud, look,
even if it was kickboxing.
Let's meet halfway. There you go. Let's meet halfway. Let's do a kickboxing fight. Allow McGregor to throw some kicks, and then cry your eyes out when he breaks your quad.
That's never going to happen, because McGregor's ego is too big, and Mayweather's made too much money and is undefeated. So actually, the question
so
that
he wouldn't even put his
to,
undefeated record on the line. Come in and do a kickboxing match.
But maybe he will. For that amount of money, and and him being that big a favorite, that he's saying, okay, I can push my record even better against this guy.
Let's do it kickboxing, though, so I can see Mayweather get smoked.
Well, Mark Henry.
That's what I want.
Mark Henry, the trainer of Frankie Edgar, Eddie Alvarez, said if by chance Conor McGregor does somehow land that left hand on Mayweather, that he could knock him out.
Okay,
he's definitely a one-shot wonder in this fight.
If Mayweather stood in front of me and let me punch him square in the face, I might be able to knock him out. I'm sure McGregor could. I'm sure Rousey could. But he's not going to let himself get hit flush, and McGregor's not used to fighting with gloves that weigh 4 times as much.
I mean, he does spar with them on all
Not
the
only
time.
do they fight, not only do they weigh 4 times as much, but a 4-ounce glove I can block about the width of my palm from getting hit. That 16-ounce glove, it's so much easier to cover up. You just bring your arms up, and suddenly those gloves cover your entire face. It's so much easier to be defensive in boxing, and Mayweather's perfect at it. He's the master of shoulder rolling and jabbing.
Yep.
That's what
you don't think after, if let's say they, it's December 2016, let's say we're going to make this fight in, September or even later. Let's say it's January 2018. Okay, give him enough time that he can actually prepare for this, and this whole Ali act goes through. I think that he can stay with him. I think this thing would go 12 rounds.
Oh, it's because Mayweather is pillow-fisted and he couldn't knock out a 3-year-old.
I agree, but I
take it back. I take that back. He did knock out his girlfriend, so he knocked out somebody.
Oh, we had to go there.
Yeah, we did.
We had to go there.
Yeah, we did.
But let's jump off this bandwagon a little bit, because I just wanted to now that I'm happy that this could happen, I'm actually giddy about this a little bit, because I think this is going to be awesome. But let's get into that, France, because now if this does happen and we bring this Ali act
into MMA, the world changes.
Does it change as in there is no more MMA? Are we really getting to that point? If this goes through in the next 6 to 12 months,
it would. This is the unfortunate part. It would turn into a lot of what boxing is right now. It's really hard to build a boxer up. You can build up an exciting guy in the UFC in about 2 years. You can take a guy from up and comer, just stepped in the cage in the UFC for the first time, to a name.
Mm-hmm.
And McGregor was only around for, what, two years?
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot harder to do in boxing. And boxing, because you don't have an organization presiding over the top, how many guys you see with records that are insane? Like 33-0, 33-1.
Sure.
That's crazy because they don't fight good guys. They get brought along with, you're going to beat this guy, but he'll help you learn this. And then you're going to beat this guy, but he presents a different challenge with this. Yeah. You don't get that in MMA. You get champions, the best fighters ever. Randy Couture, who has a record of like 16-9 or something close to that. And he's one of the greatest fighters of all time because you're always forced to fight the best guys. Always. And because of that, it's different sport. It's an entirely different sport. If you allow the Ali
I
Act
think
in,
the physicality and the way the fight is, I agree, it's a total different sport.
but you're forced to fight good fighters. You don't get those 30 fights to prep so that you can have the one big fight and make all the money. You fight tough guys all the way through. And once you get to the top 5, top 10, it's tough fights until your career's over.
I just think at this point, with the way McGregor is going about this, we might be getting to that day sooner than we want.
Hey, look, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I don't think it can last for much longer. I really don't. McGregor's not going to go in there. This is mixed martial arts. He won't be the guy killing everybody for more than another year or so. Maybe 2.
So that would be why he's pushing this. And ultimately, if this gets traction, this could get really ugly really quick.
I still don't think it's going to happen without the UFC support because I don't think he would just ruin every other opportunity he has to make money.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I guess what I'm meaning is, like we were talking about before, where they're trying to build a union and get the fighters together. If this Ali Act goes through for him and he can fight, now other people are going to go and do the same thing, and all they got to do is go to California and say, I want to box.
It would destroy the world of mixed martial arts as we know it because any contract can no longer be over a year. Basically, anybody, as soon as that ruling goes through... Now you're doing
a fight by fight.
Well, as soon as that ruling goes through for McGregor, every contract the UFC's got on the books is null and void. Gone. Doesn't count anymore.
And then I think, just thinking off the top of my head, if I'm running the UFC, then I'm running to say, listen, we'll give you more. We'll give you guys more.
Absolutely.
No problem. We'll get 25%. Absolutely. You guys can have 25%. Go for gold.
Yeah, but if fighters are complaining about how much they're getting paid right now through the UFC, wait until this happens. Because look at what happened with the Manny Pacquiao Mayweather pay-per-view, the biggest pay-per-view of all time. What did the first fight of the night get paid?
The guy who lost that fight got $500.
$500. Yeah. The first fight at a UFC event, they make $10,000, $10,000,
depending on who it is and where the card is.
Yeah, but France, all this is leverage. That's all they want. Yeah. It doesn't matter. The money of what they'll make. The idea isn't I'm going to go and box now because I can do this. The idea is if he can pass this through and say, okay, all I got to do is this. If the UFC is going to say, fine, go ahead. We don't want you anymore. We got plenty more. Then they realize, well, maybe we don't have plenty more.
The unfortunate part about all this, too, is that the UFC gets all the bad publicity. And that is because they're so big that you get people who, if I say MMA, don't even know what I'm saying until I go UFC. And they go, okay, yeah, I know that. Well, unfortunately, they're stuck with the bad name and the bad rap over money. They're paying guys $8,000 to $10,000 just to show up for the first fight of the night. Bellator's paying you $1,500, and part of your contract in order to get the fight is, all right, we're going to pay you $1,500 and you have to sell 50 tickets. And they got to go to their friends and family or buy them themselves and sell 50 tickets in order just to fight on the card. Mm. They're not getting any bad publicity for paying a guy $1,500 and he's got to come out of his own pocket or his family's pockets and sell tickets. The UFC just goes, here's $10,000, show up.
Well, look at what the Bellator paid their golden boy, their lightweight champion, $50,000. No
Michael Chandler got paid $50
just to show. No win money, no win bonus. Ben Henderson got $50. Most of the average guys in the UFC right now are making $50.
Yeah, that's sad. $50,000 and nothing else is real bad.
Like the top 15, top 10, top 5 are making $50, $60, $100,000.
Yeah, even Rafael Dos Anjos, who's an unknown lightweight champ, made $250K, I think, in his last fight to lose.
It's honestly when we're talking about money, there's only one person I can go to, and it's not in boxing or in MMA. It's
here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Shane O'Mac, people. Let's go.
Jesus.
Come on now. No, I had to throw it in there because I just thought it was funny.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, for the future of MMA and the UFC, I honestly hope this doesn't go through.
Yeah, let's
Not at all.
because it opens up a can of worms. It's Pandora's box, and you
It is.
just really don't want to see it happen.
It's really not going to be good if this were to happen. As much as I'm I'm the guy like we were talking about. I really got into UFC 205 because of what it brought for me. But I would love to see this Mayweather McGregor thing happen. This would be just amazing. But
We should probably mention, because it just got announced, UFC 208 just got canceled in Anaheim, California, and moved to Brooklyn at the Barclays Center on the 11th of February.
Yep.
what?
So now February 11th, Barclays Center, UFC 208. They moved it out of Anaheim.
It was originally the Barkley fight was going to be UFC 209, but because the Bellator, I mean, we were just talking about how they're trying to scrap for fights for UFC 206, and they have UFC 207 coming up right at the end of December.
It didn't look good.
They couldn't find too many fights that'd be pay-per-view worthy.
So they moved it. So now February 11th in the Barclays Center, Brooklyn, UFC 208. And it will not feature Michael Bisping, Yoel Romero, from what I have read, because Michael Bisping will not be medically cleared yet till March.
Damn.
So that fight's still happening. If you watched and you saw Michael Bisping flipping the bird to Yoel Romero at UFC 205, that fight's
I
happening.
love you,
Not
boy. I love you. Yoel Romero in that
That's great.
pre-fight.
That's awesome.
I love you, boy.
That is just
Michael.
great.
I love you.
Oh, man, dude. UFC 205 was epic, but not only was that great, this weekend we have another finale. Is that right, guys? What's going on this weekend?
The Ultimate Fighter finale is coming up with the flyweight title on the line. Demetrius Johnson versus Tim Elliott. And right underneath that, you have the coaches, Henry Cejudo versus Joseph Benavidez on Fox Sports 1.
For anybody that hasn't seen Demetrius fight, pound for pound, best fighter in the world.
Definitely.
And that Cejudo-Benavidez fight should be great. That's going to be on Fox Sports 1. Other than that, I think we're all set, bud.
All right, quick. I'm going to throw you on the spot. Give me picks right now.
Johnson by a landslide.
Okay.
And I will take Benavidez over Cejudo in a hard-fought 3-round decision.
I might have to go the other way with Cejudo over Benavidez for a decision, but Mighty Mouse Demetrius Johnson, he's never going to be beat at the flyweight.
And the winner of that Cejudo-Benavidez fight is probably going to get a title shot against Johnson, and Johnson's going to smoke them too.
He already did.
I love it. Guys, we'll give you a proof of performance next week when we talk about UFC Fight Night coming to Albany next Friday. It's going to be epic. Make sure you tune into that show next Thursday. It's going to be awesome. We'll break down that card for you, break down everything you guys are going to want to know for next Friday's UFC Fight Night in Albany. For Ian Ford and Brian France, I'm your producer extraordinaire, Brian, the closer, Mariano. Let's hope for no Mayweather and McGregor so we can hold on to UFC all the time now, and we'll see you guys in the Octagon.